Hey, before we get into the video, I just wanted to run a quick apology for most of the footage being from Horizon, just because it's currently the game I'm playing right now. So unless I'm making a very, video specific discussion, like I did with The Last of Us, I'm not really gonna go back and dig into like some of my old footage. So most of the video will be Horizon footage, but I will plug in context specific pictures and videos when needed to. But yeah, apologies for that. Hope you guys enjoy the video. Peace out. Believe it or not, Ubisoft used to make amazingly fun and highly praised video games. If you were around in the original Xbox and PS2 days, that is when I would personally say Ubisoft was arguably in their prime. The Tom Clancy's games and other Ubisoft releases on those consoles were probably some of their best games, excluding the acclaimed Far Cry series and Assassin's Creed franchises, and all sorts of other great IP and franchises that went into the following two console generations. Splinter Cell, Ghost Recon, and Rainbow Six Games all won multiple awards, including multiple Game of the Year awards. And then we have their other great franchises, like I was mentioning, Far Cry and Assassin's Creed. Ubisoft was on an upwards trend, and they became arguably one of the biggest gaming companies in the industry. Between lots of new IPs, long support for their games, and great lineups, diversity, and overall good quality of games, they were one of the best publishers out there. But then around the end of the PlayStation 4 and Xbox One mid-generation, I would say, they started to go downhill fast. They started to make the same games again. They dropped their smaller projects. Their projects started entering development hell, and talent started leaving. And by the end of the generation, their products were starting to get released with more and more issues, culminating with the famous Ghost Recon Breakpoint, which we have played on this channel before. To this date, the irony of that name is still amazing, because it was the breaking point for Ubisoft. And as a Ghost Recon fan myself, playing that after I'd played Ghost Recon Wildlands with my friends was just extremely disappointing in all levels. And although we kind of knew going into the release what they were doing, people really thought that, okay, maybe a franchise so beloved like Ghost Recon, Ubisoft weren't going to give it the same treatment that they were giving their other franchises. But sadly, we were all wrong. Nowadays, they follow the same game formula that successfully made them money before, so that they make money again. Just like Activision and other studios, since the bugs and flaws in their games don't necessarily affect their earnings that much, they don't really care to change the formula. And some people are loyal fans and stick to the producer, even if the quality is reducing significantly. And this is not just with Ubisoft, we see it with EA as well. And it happens with every product from any company that was known to be once good at some point. And we see it a lot now, like I was saying, especially with the sports franchises, which are just basically yearly reskins and not actually yearly new games. Ubisoft, as we see them now, has just been bringing out lackluster games like Tom Clancy's Rainbow Six Extraction, which was basically a knockoff of a Rainbow Six Siege event. Far Cry 6 had a fun story, but it was just a reskinned Far Cry 5, Far Cry Primal. We had Hyperscape, which was again a bit of a mess of a free-to-play game, and Watch Dogs Legion, which was another reskinned Watch Dogs. Yet, once upon a time, Ubisoft had Far Cry as a huge new experience at every single launch in an open world that was loved for having charismatic villains that were the face of the game. And Assassin's Creed, a unique concept at one stage, Ubisoft was at its peak and one of the biggest publishers in a long time, and it was deserved. So what exactly happened? Well, to begin with, the scope of the releases has slowly narrowed over the years. Ubisoft games used to be unique, feeling and looking different each in their own way. However, that couldn't be further from the truth now. Now they're all like McDonald's of the gaming industry. It's not necessarily bad, but it's not good either way. You sort of know what you're getting going into a Ubisoft game nowadays, but it just never changes. The formula is the same over and over and over again. If someone were to ask me today what Ubisoft games have become, I would use one word, and that word is generic. When we look at Far Cry, Assassin's Creed, they all start to become the same game in different locations. Assassin's Creed did try and change the formula, but Odyssey and Valhalla felt too similar to Origins and have begun to suffer as well. It's got to a point with Ubisoft, particularly with Assassin's Creed and Far Cry, that there are literally no differences in the games, barring locations and characters. The games are just reskinned, which is exactly what they did with Far Cry Primal, using the exact same map but reskinning it. Gamers all know what to expect from the Ubisoft release. A ton of content scattered across a massive environment. Whilst this premise has proven successful for many titles, the fact that pretty much every game that sports companies produce follows the same formula has made players grow tired of the plethora of franchises under their belt, because it's just the same thing over and over and over and over again, and it's now being brought into each and every single one of their IPs. Starting on a 4-year development cycle, Far Cry 3 perfected systems originating in previous releases and is considered the pinnacle of this series. Attempting to capitalize on its success, Ubisoft has released a staggering 6 additions to the franchise in 9 years, each of which is almost a carbon copy of previous entries. Quoting the enigmatic VAAS from Far Cry 3, insanity is doing the exact same fucking thing over and over again, expecting shit to change.
Did I ever tell you what the definition of insanity is? Insanity is doing the exact same fucking thing over and over again, expecting shit to change. That is crazy.
It's sad that Ubisoft needs to listen to its antagonists and move away from this formulaic approach to video game design. Another problem is that Ubisoft games have gotten too big for their own good, particularly Assassin's Creed. When Odyssey was released, fans begged for a smaller map, a more condensed map. Instead, Assassin's Creed Valhalla got even bigger, and map sizes normally aren't an issue if you're actually populating that world and making it feel alive, which is something that Ubisoft always chooses not to do. They just throw empty space, long areas just filled with loot boxes and endless side missions. It doesn't actually really feel alive the way you would say perhaps a GTA or a Red Dead Redemption and other games of that nature do. Another thing is that it seems many of Ubisoft's games of late have had troubled development periods or releases. Then it came big, one all dirty laundry started to show up, and harassment and mistreatment of employees, evidence started popping up, lawsuits and court cases started popping up. But again, for the purposes of this video being focused on just the games themselves, we won't necessarily dig into that, but I'm sure a quick Google search would give any answers to what's going on with regarding to that. And according to reports also, they almost did nothing to improve things within the work culture. And just like other companies, they just went silent and waited for things to calm down. And still, after all of that, Ubisoft decided to shift things regarding games for current generations, and apparently for the worse. One of their obvious goals is to chase the Fortnite level free-to-play live service model. And they're so focused on that they started developing a crazy amount of free-to-play products while lowering their actual non-free-to-play and non-multiplayer oriented output. That is why we are now in a situation where Ubisoft in 2022 still doesn't have a non-multiplayer and non-free-to-play release date announced and or released. I think Skull and Bones is the only exception that just recently got announced. Ghost Recon Frontline got announced as part of the Ghost Recon anniversary stream, and the beta was announced, and that should have been released a couple of weeks after announcement, but the backlash was so bad that Ubisoft had to completely abandon indefinitely. So not just like leaving and walking away, they just completely abandoned the entire plan when the entire Ghost Recon community was just basically like, what are you doing? Then we have the entire Prince of Persia remake debacle and so forth. And let's not even get started on the whole Ubisoft NFT, air quotes, Ubisoft Quartz thing that they went silent. They were mighty silent about it since introducing it, even though at the time of them launching their whole NFT thing, a lot of people were very vocal on Twitter, even the actual, the person in charge of it. Their wish was to turn every single one of their franchises into live service titles, and no matter the cost. Look at Assassin's Creed Valhalla, and in general, the destruction of the actual Assassin's Creed franchise. just so that they can keep earning money from microtransactions. They will continue to just bastardize all of their titles. So here we are, second year of a new generation of consoles, and one of the publishers who previously was one of the first to adopt new hardware and release games for it, more or less without an announced game for 2022, like we were mentioning, apart from Skull and Bones. Other parts of their games are still in development hell. Workplace more or less the same since the allegations. The company that was once one of the publishers with the most diverse lineup and company with the most new IPs is now just constantly chasing free-to-play games and live service games. And they would slap the brand on anything to sell it, whether or not it fits the title, especially their whole famous title of a Ubisoft original. And they even bastardized that slogan as much as they did with Tom Clancy. Obviously, nothing is permanent, and I for one hope that they get their act together. It's just that I guess in this moment, the industry as a whole is just waiting to see if Ubisoft will return to their former glory days, or if they'll just keep chasing that constant free-to-play live service mechanics. And it's clear that Ubisoft has a very big problem. Their games feel too familiar. They lack originality. Although the company is looking to bring back classics, it's doing it in the safest way possible. And whilst there's a glimmer of hope with games such as Beyond Good and Evil 2, words such as games as a service are being associated with the title over and over again, diminishing its appeal from the beginning. Ubisoft is in a rut and it needs to change something. It's time for the publishers to take a risk, rather than rely on the same formula that has become a tiring trait in most of their games. What are your thoughts on Ubisoft? Do you think they need to make a drastic change? Or do you think their approach to video game design is okay? Are you excited about any of their upcoming titles? Or would you have preferred them to introduce us to new adventures? As always, thank you for tuning in. Stay safe, stay healthy, stay dangerous, and peace out.
Oh, Ubisoft!